The bullet that shattered the schoolhouse window on that sweltering August afternoon in 1877 was meant for Olivia Osborne, though she would not know it until much later. Olivia had been writing multiplication tables on the dusty chalkboard when the glass exploded inward, sending shards across the worn wooden floor and causing 16 children to scream and duck beneath their desks. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed herself against the wall, chalk still clutched in her trembling fingers. Another shot followed, then another, each one punching holes through the thin walls of the one-room schoolhouse on the edge of Laramie, Wyoming. She had heard tales of bandits in these parts, of course. Everyone had. The territory was still rough, still wild despite the railroad that had pushed through nearly a decade before. But Olivia had believed herself safe here, teaching arithmetic and reading to the children of ranchers and shopkeepers. She had been naive. "Children, stay down," she commanded, her voice steadier than she felt. At 22 years old, she had been teaching for only 3 months since arriving from Pennsylvania, and nothing in her training had prepared her for gunfire. "Do not move unless I tell you to." Through the broken window, she could see 3 men on horseback circling the building. Their faces were covered with bandanas, their hats pulled low. One of them fired again, this time at the door, and the old lock shattered. Olivia's blood ran cold. They were not simply passing through or causing trouble. They meant to come inside. She looked around desperately for anything she could use as a weapon. A poker from the small stove in the corner. A heavy book. Her own 2 hands if it came to that. She would not let these men hurt her students without a fight. The door burst open, and the first bandit stepped inside. His eyes found her immediately, and through the bandana she could hear him laugh. "There she is, boys, the pretty little schoolteacher from back east. Please," Olivia said, stepping between the man and her huddled students. "Whatever you want, these children have nothing to do with it. Let them go." "We do not want the brats," the bandit said. His hand moved to his gun belt. "The boss wants you, Miss Osborne. Seems your daddy back in Philadelphia owes some folks a considerable amount of money, and you are going to be his incentive to pay up. Her father, of course. The gambling debts that had forced her to leave home, to seek work out west where she might escape his creditors. She should have known they would find her eventually. Should have known that her father's mistakes would follow her across half a continent. "I have no money," she said. "My father and I are estranged. I cannot help you." "That is not our problem, sweetheart. Now you can come quiet, or we can make this hard on everyone here." The second bandit had entered now, his gun drawn and pointed at the cluster of children near the front row. Little Sarah Mitchell was crying silently, tears streaming down her freckled face. Tommy Johnson held his younger sister protectively. They were babies, all of them, the oldest barely 13. Olivia felt her resolve harden into something cold and sharp. She would go with these men. She would do whatever it took to keep her students safe. "Very well," she said. "But you must promise not to harm the children. Let them run home, please." The first bandit seemed to consider this. Then he shrugged. "Fine by me. We got what we came for." Before Olivia could take a step toward them, before the children could move, a voice rang out from the doorway. "I would reconsider that plan if I were you gentlemen." Everyone turned. The third bandit, who had been holding the horses, now stood in the doorway, but he was not alone. Behind him, pressing a revolver firmly against the base of his skull, was a tall cowboy with sun-weathered skin and the coldest blue eyes Olivia had ever seen. He wore typical ranch clothes, dusty from riding, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast shadows across his angular face. There was something in his bearing that spoke of absolute certainty, of a man who knew exactly what he was capable of. "Drop your weapons," the cowboy said quietly. "Do it now, or your friend here will not see another sunrise." The two bandits inside the schoolhouse hesitated. The one with his gun trained on the children shifted his aim toward the cowboy. "You shoot him. We shoot you and every person in this room." "Maybe," the cowboy agreed. His voice remained calm, almost conversational. "But your boss will not be happy if you come back empty-handed and one man short." Seems like a poor trade for a schoolteacher. He thinks he can sell back to her father. There was a long, tense moment where nobody moved. Olivia could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of every child's life pressing down on her shoulders. Then the cowboy thumbed back the hammer of his revolver, and the click echoed through the silent room like thunder. "Last chance," he said. The first bandit swore viciously but lowered his weapon. The second followed suit. "This is not over," the first one growled. "Tell the boss we will be back, and next time you will not get within a mile of this schoolhouse," the cowboy interrupted. "Because I will be watching. Now get on your horses and ride out of Laramie. If I see any of you in this town again, I will not be so generous with your lives." He released the third bandit with a shove, sending him stumbling toward his companions. The three men backed out slowly, their eyes full of hatred and promises of vengeance. But they went. Olivia heard the sound of horses galloping away, hoofbeats fading into the distance, and only then did she allow herself to breathe. The cowboy holstered his gun and removed his hat, revealing sandy brown hair that fell across his forehead. He looked at the children first. "Is anyone hurt?" A chorus of small voices answered in the negative. The cowboy nodded. "Good. You should all head home now. Tell your parents what happened here. Tell them Miss Osborne is safe." The children did not need to be told twice. They scrambled for the door, some pausing to hug Olivia on their way out, others simply running for the safety of their families. Within moments, the schoolhouse was empty except for Olivia and her unexpected rescuer. She found that her legs were shaking, the adrenaline draining from her body and leaving her weak. She sank onto the edge of her desk, still clutching the piece of chalk. "Thank you," she managed. "I do not know how to properly thank you. You saved all of us." The cowboy was surveying the damage to the room, his expression unreadable. "Name is Bennett Parker," he said. "I work at the Double R Ranch just outside of town. Was riding in for supplies when I saw those three circling this building. Figured they were up to no good." "Olivia Osborne," she replied. "And you figured correctly. They were after me. My father owes money to dangerous men, it seems, and they thought to use me as leverage." Bennett's blue eyes settled on her, and she felt the intensity of his gaze like a physical thing. "Your father is in Philadelphia." "Yes. I came west to escape his debts, but apparently I did not come far enough." "Laramie is about as far west as you can get without hitting the mountains," Bennett said. "Those men will be back, Miss Osborne. Whoever sent them will not give up so easily. You need protection." Olivia straightened her spine, calling on the same strength that had allowed her to cross a continent alone, to build a life in a strange place. "I will speak with Sheriff Morrison. Perhaps he can post a deputy near the schoolhouse. Or, Sheriff Morrison is a good man, but he has 3 deputies covering the whole county," Bennett interrupted. "He cannot spare someone to watch you day and night. Those bandits know where you live, where you work. They will come back when they think you are vulnerable." "Then what do you suggest?" Olivia asked, frustration creeping into her voice. "I cannot simply leave. These children need a teacher." The previous schoolteacher departed quite suddenly, and it took the town months to find someone willing to come out here. "If I abandon them, I am not suggesting you leave," Bennett said. His voice had gentled somewhat. "I am suggesting you let me help you. My ranch is not far. I can ride to town each day, make sure you get to and from the schoolhouse safely. Keep an eye out for trouble." Olivia stared at him. You would do that? For a stranger? Something flickered in Bennett's eyes, an emotion she could not quite name. My mother was a schoolteacher, he said quietly. Back in Texas, before the war. She believed education was the most important thing she could give to the children in her community. She was killed by raiders when I was 16. So no, Miss Osborne, I am not doing this for a stranger. I am doing this because someone should have protected her, and no one did. The raw honesty in his words took Olivia's breath away. She found herself nodding before she could think better of it. Then I accept your offer, Mr. Parker, and I am deeply sorry for your loss. Bennett put his hat back on, the brim once again shadowing his features. Be ready at dawn tomorrow. I will escort you to school and back home again in the evening. Until we figure out a more permanent solution, you should not be alone. I live in the boarding house on Main Street, Olivia told him. Mrs. Henderson's place. I know it. I will be there at first light. He moved toward the door, then paused. Lock your door tonight, Miss Osborne, and if you have a gun, keep it loaded. I do not own a gun. Bennett frowned. Then tomorrow we will remedy that. A woman living alone in this territory needs to know how to defend herself. He left before she could respond, his boots echoing on the wooden steps outside. Olivia sat in the damaged schoolhouse, surrounded by broken glass and bullet holes, and wondered what she had just agreed to. Bennett Parker was clearly a capable man, perhaps even dangerous in his own right. But there had been kindness in his eyes when he spoke of his mother, and his concern for the children had been genuine. She picked up a broom and began cleaning up the glass, her mind racing. Her father's debts had finally caught up with her, but she had not expected them to manifest as armed men threatening children. The guilt was sharp and bitter. These people had welcomed her to Laramie, had trusted her with their most precious treasures, and now she had brought violence to their doorstep. By the time she locked the schoolhouse door and walked the 6 blocks to Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, the sun was setting in shades of gold and crimson. The town looked peaceful in the evening light, with families sitting on porches and the smell of cooking fires drifting through the air. But Olivia could not shake the feeling of eyes watching her from every shadow, of danger lurking just out of sight. Mrs. Henderson, a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an endless supply of biscuits, met her at the door. Heard what happened at the school, she said without preamble. You all right, dear? News traveled fast in small towns. Olivia should have expected that. I am unharmed, thank you. The children are all safe. Thank the Lord and Bennett Parker, Mrs. Henderson said, ushering her inside. That boy has always had a good heart, lost his whole family, you know. Parents during the war, brother to a fever a few years back. Ranch is all he has left, and he works it alone except for a couple of seasonal hands. Olivia felt a pang of sympathy. She had lost her mother young and her father to his vices, but Bennett had lost everyone. He has offered to escort me to and from school, she said, until the danger passes. Mrs. Henderson nodded approvingly. Good. He is the right man for the job, fought in the Indian Wars, I hear, though he does not talk about it, knows how to handle himself. She patted Olivia's arm. Now, you come have some supper. I made extra stew, and you look like you could use a strong cup of coffee. Olivia let herself be led to the dining room, where 3 other boarders were already eating. They looked up as she entered, their faces full of questions, and she found herself recounting the day's events once more. By the time she finally retreated to her small room on the 2nd floor, she was exhausted in body and spirit. She locked the door as Bennett had instructed and changed into her nightgown. The room was sparse but comfortable, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small desk where she prepared lessons, and a window that looked out over the street. She extinguished the lamp and lay down, but sleep eluded her. Every sound made her jump. The creak of floorboards, the rattle of wind against glass, the distant bark of a dog. She kept seeing those bandits in her mind, kept hearing the cold promise in their voices. They would be back, and next time they might succeed in taking her. She thought of her father, probably sitting in some Philadelphia gambling den at this very moment, oblivious to the consequences of his actions. He had always been selfish, always put his own desires before the needs of his family. Her mother had died worn down by worry and poverty while he threw away every dollar they had. And even after Olivia had left, even after she had severed all ties and made a new life for herself, he still managed to put her in danger. Anger burned in her chest, hot and bitter. But beneath it was fear. What if these men succeeded? What if they dragged her back east, held her hostage until her father paid debts she knew he could never repay? What would they do to her when they realized she was worthless as a bargaining chip? The questions chased themselves around her mind until exhaustion finally claimed her near midnight. She slept fitfully, dreaming of gunshots and cold eyes and a cowboy with sandy hair who promised protection he might not be able to deliver. When dawn light crept through her window, Olivia rose and dressed with trembling hands. She chose her most practical dress, a brown calico that would not show dust, and pinned her dark hair into a simple bun. Her reflection in the small mirror showed shadows under her green eyes and a tightness around her mouth. She looked like what she was, a woman frightened but determined to face what came. She went downstairs to find Mrs. Henderson already up and cooking breakfast. The smell of bacon and fresh bread made her stomach rumble despite her anxiety. "Eat something," Mrs. Henderson commanded, setting a plate in front of her. "You will need your strength." Olivia managed a few bites, though the food tasted like sawdust in her dry mouth. She was washing her plate when a knock sounded at the front door. Mrs. Henderson opened it to reveal Bennett Parker, hat in hand, looking exactly as composed as he had the day before. "Morning, Mrs. Henderson, Miss Osborne," he nodded to each of them. "Ready." Olivia retrieved her lesson books and the lunch pail Mrs. Henderson had packed. "As ready as I shall ever be." Bennett offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. They walked out into the cool morning air, and Olivia saw that he had brought 2 horses. One was a large bay gelding that she assumed was his. The other was a gentle-looking mare with a kind eye. "We are riding," she asked. "Faster than walking, and it gives us better visibility," Bennett explained. "Can you ride, or do you need help mounting? I can ride." She had learned as a girl, though it had been years. Bennett helped her into the saddle anyway, his hands strong and steady on her waist, and she tried not to notice how her heart skipped at the contact. They rode through the waking town, past the general store and the saloon and the church with its white steeple. A few early risers waved to them, and Olivia saw the curious looks they drew. By noon, everyone in Laramie would know that Bennett Parker was escorting the schoolteacher. She wondered what they would say about it. The schoolhouse came into view, and Olivia's shoulders tensed. But the building looked peaceful in the morning light, with no sign of bandits or trouble. Bennett dismounted and helped her down, then surveyed the area with a practiced eye. "I am going to take a look around," he said. "Make sure no one has been here since yesterday. Wait here." He walked the perimeter of the building, checking the windows and the small shed out back where firewood was stored. Olivia held the horse's reins and tried to calm her racing heart. When Bennett returned, he was frowning. "Someone was here in the night," he said. "Boot prints all around the building. They were watching to see if you would come back." Fear coiled in Olivia's stomach. "What do we do? You teach your students," Bennett said firmly. "That is what you came here to do, and you will not let these men stop you, but I am staying nearby. I will be outside, keeping watch. If anything happens, you call for me." "You cannot spend all day sitting outside the schoolhouse," Olivia protested. "What about your ranch, your work?" "My foreman can handle things for a few days. This is more important." He met her eyes, and she saw the same determination that had been there when he faced down 3 armed men. "I made you a promise, Miss Osborne. I intend to keep it." The children began arriving shortly after, many of them accompanied by worried parents who wanted to see that their teacher was safe. Olivia reassured them as best she could, introduced those who did not know him to Bennett, and finally managed to start the day's lessons an hour late. It was difficult to focus on teaching with everything that had happened, but the routine helped calm her nerves. The children were quieter than usual, more subdued, and she knew they were still frightened from the previous day. She did her best to make the lessons engaging, to distract them from their fears with stories and songs and challenging arithmetic problems. At mid-morning recess, she stepped outside to find Bennett sitting on a bench he had pulled around from the side of the building, his rifle across his knees. He looked relaxed, almost casual, but his eyes never stopped moving, scanning the horizon and the road and the scattered buildings of the town. "Everything all right?" he asked. "As all right as it can be," Olivia said. She sat down beside him, suddenly bone-tired despite the early hour. "Thank you again for doing this. I know you have better things to do with your time." "Not particularly." Bennett glanced at her. "Life on a ranch is hard work, but it is also lonely. It has been a long time since I had something to protect besides cattle and land." There was something in his voice, a loneliness that matched her own. Olivia found herself saying, "I know what you mean. Coming out here, I thought I would find a fresh start, a place where my past did not matter, but it followed me anyway." "Pasts have a way of doing that," Bennett said. "But that does not mean you cannot build something new, something better." "Is that what you are doing? Building something better?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I am trying. Some days are easier than others." The bell rang, calling the children back inside, and Olivia stood. Bennett stood with her, and for a moment they were very close, near enough that she could see the faint scar on his jaw and the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. Her breath caught. "Be careful in there," he said softly, "and call if you need me." "I will." She went back to her students, feeling his presence like a warm hand on her back. The rest of the day passed without incident, and when the final bell rang and the children scattered to their homes, Olivia found herself almost disappointed that it was over. The hours of teaching had been a respite from fear, a return to normalcy. Bennett helped her lock the schoolhouse and led both horses around. "Ready to head back, actually," Olivia said, surprising herself. "You mentioned teaching me to shoot. Is that offer still open?" Bennett looked pleased. "It is. We can ride out a ways, find a spot where we will not disturb anyone. You should learn the basics at least." They rode east out of town, following a dry creek bed until they were well away from any buildings. Bennett dismounted in a small clearing and helped Olivia down. From his saddlebag, he produced a smaller revolver, lighter than the Colt he wore at his hip. "This is more manageable for someone your size," he explained. "Less kick, easier to aim, but it will still stop a man if you hit him right." He spent the next hour teaching her the fundamentals. How to load the weapon, how to hold it properly, both hands supporting the grip, how to sight down the barrel and squeeze the trigger smoothly rather than jerking it. Olivia listened carefully, committing each instruction to memory. Her first few shots went wide, but by the end of the lesson she was hitting the dead tree Bennett had set up as a target more often than not. "You are a natural," he said, and she could hear the approval in his voice. "Keep practicing, and you will be dangerous." "I never thought I would need to be dangerous," Olivia admitted, handing the gun back. I came out here to teach children to read, not to shoot. Sometimes we have to be more than we planned, Bennett said. He reloaded the revolver and held it out to her. Keep it. I have others and you need one. Olivia hesitated. The weight of the gun in her hand felt like a responsibility she had not asked for, but Bennett was right. She needed to be able to defend herself. Thank you, she said. I will practice. They rode back to town as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The mountains in the distance were purple shadows against the golden sky, and the air had taken on the coolness that came with autumn evenings. Despite everything, Olivia found herself noticing how beautiful Wyoming was, how different from the crowded streets and gray skies of Philadelphia. What made you decide to become a teacher? Bennett asked as they rode. My mother, Olivia said. She never had much education herself, but she believed it was the key to a better life. She made sure I learned to read and write, scraped together money for books. When she died, I decided to honor her by teaching others, by giving children the opportunities she never had. She would be proud of you. The simple statement brought unexpected tears to Olivia's eyes. I hope so. I like to think she would be pleased that I did not let my father destroy me the way he destroyed her. Your father is a fool, Bennett said bluntly. Any man who would gamble away his family's security and then leave his daughter to face the consequences is not worth your loyalty or your tears. Olivia laughed despite herself, a short, bitter sound. I could not agree more. I have not spoken to him in over a year. I do not even know if he is aware that I left Philadelphia. If he is worth anything at all, he will find a way to settle his debts and get these men to leave you alone. I would not count on it. They reached Mrs. Henderson's boarding house as dusk settled over the town. Bennett dismounted and helped Olivia down, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary. She looked up at him, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. I will be here at dawn again tomorrow, he said, and every day after until this is resolved. Bennett, she said, using his first name for the first time, you cannot put your life on hold for me. This could take weeks, months even. Then I will be here for weeks or months. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. You are not alone in this, Olivia. Not anymore. The use of her given name sent a flutter through her chest. She found herself nodding, unable to form words. Bennett touched the brim of his hat and swung back into his saddle. She watched him ride away into the gathering darkness, and only then did she realize that somewhere in the space of 2 days, this quiet cowboy had become someone she trusted. Someone she was beginning to care for far more than was wise. Mrs. Henderson was waiting with questions and supper, and Olivia spent the evening recounting her shooting lesson. The other boarders were fascinated and impressed, and Miss Abigail Porter, a seamstress who occupied the room next to Olivia's, declared that she too wanted to learn to shoot. A woman alone cannot be too careful, Miss Porter said firmly. Perhaps Mr. Parker would be willing to instruct a few of us. I will ask him, Olivia promised. That night she slept with the loaded revolver on her bedside table. Its presence was both comforting and disturbing, a reminder of the danger that lurked but also of the fact that she was not helpless. Bennett had given her the means to fight back. The next 3 days followed a similar pattern. Bennett arrived at dawn. They rode to the schoolhouse together. He kept watch while she taught. In the afternoons, he gave her shooting lessons, and she grew steadily more confident with the weapon. In the evenings, they talked as he escorted her home, sharing stories of their pasts and their hopes for the future. Olivia learned that Bennett was 26 years old, that he had inherited his ranch when his brother died of typhoid fever, that he was trying to build up the herd enough to supply beef to the railroad workers and the growing towns. He spoke of his mother with love and his father with respect, and she could tell that their loss still hurt him deeply. In turn, she told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her mother's quiet strength and her father's gradual descent into gambling and debt. She told him about the moment she had decided to leave, when creditors had come to their door threatening violence, and her father had been nowhere to be found. She had packed a single trunk, bought a train ticket with money she had saved from teaching at a church school, and headed west without looking back. "You regret it?" Bennett asked. "Leaving everything you knew?" "Not for a moment," Olivia said honestly. "Philadelphia held nothing for me but memories and debt. Here I have purpose. I have children who depend on me. I have a life that is mine." "And now you have trouble that is not yours," Bennett said grimly, "because of your father's mistakes." "Yes. But I also have someone willing to help me face it. That is more than I ever had back east." They were sitting by the creek again, taking a break from shooting practice. The afternoon sun was warm on Olivia's face, and she felt more at peace than she had in days. Bennett was cleaning his rifle, his hands moving with practiced efficiency, and she found herself watching the way the light caught in his hair, the strength in his forearms where he had rolled up his sleeves. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, glancing up and catching her staring. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Nothing important, liar." But he said it with a small smile that softened his stern features. "You looked very serious." "I was thinking," Olivia said slowly, "that I am grateful you were there that day, that you chose to help instead of riding past. My life would be very different right now if you had not intervened." "I could not have ridden past," Bennett said. "It is not in me to ignore someone in need. Still, you have gone far beyond what anyone could reasonably expect. You have given me time and protection and your own safety. Why?" Bennett set down the rifle and looked at her directly. "Because when I saw those men threaten you and those children, I saw my mother all over again. I saw the fear in your eyes, the determination to protect your students even if it cost you your life. And I knew I could not walk away. I would not let another good woman be hurt by bad men if I had any power to stop it." His words were raw with old pain and new purpose. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "Your mother would be proud of the man you have become." "I hope so." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers gentle against her skin. "And I think your mother would be proud of you too. You did not let fear stop you from teaching today. You stood your ground." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Olivia had no name for. Her heart was beating too fast, and she could not look away from Bennett's blue eyes. If she leaned forward just slightly, their lips would meet. The thought sent a thrill of nervous anticipation through her. But Bennett pulled back, clearing his throat. "We should head back before dark. Riding in the dark is when accidents happen." Olivia nodded, trying to ignore the disappointment that washed through her. What was she thinking? She had known this man for only days. Yes, he had saved her life. Yes, she felt safe with him in a way she had never felt safe with anyone. But that did not mean she should be imagining kissing him, imagining more. They rode back to town in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. When Bennett left her at Mrs. Henderson's door, his hand squeezed hers briefly. "Sleep well, Olivia." "You too." She watched him ride away, then went inside to face Mrs. Henderson's knowing look. The older woman said nothing, but her smile spoke volumes. On the 5th day, Sheriff Morrison came to the schoolhouse during morning recess. He was a tall man with a thick mustache and weary eyes, and he nodded respectfully to both Olivia and Bennett. "Miss Osborne, Bennett, I wanted to update you on the situation." He glanced at the children playing nearby and lowered his voice. "I sent telegrams to Philadelphia, made some inquiries. Your father's situation is worse than you probably know. He owes money to the Mallory gang, about $5,000. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. $5,000. It was an impossible sum, more money than she would earn in a decade of teaching. The Mallorys are expanding their operations west, the sheriff continued. They are trying to set up gambling halls and protection rackets in the mining towns. Your father was foolish enough to borrow from them, and when he could not pay, he apparently mentioned that his daughter had gone to Wyoming. They figured they could use you as leverage. So they sent men after her, Bennett said. His voice was cold. How many men do the Mallorys have in the area? That I do not know for certain. Could be 3, could be a dozen. But they are serious about getting their money, and they are not the type to give up easy. The sheriff looked at Olivia with sympathy. I am sorry, miss. This is not a situation any young woman should have to face. But I want you to know that my office is doing everything we can to protect you. Thank you, Sheriff, Olivia managed. Bennett, a word. The sheriff jerked his head toward the road, and the 2 men walked out of earshot. Olivia watched them talk, saw the grim set of Bennett's jaw and the sheriff's emphatic gestures. When they returned, Bennett's expression was even more determined than before. The sheriff agrees that you should not be alone, Bennett said. We discussed options. The safest thing would be for you to stay at my ranch until this is settled. Olivia blinked. Stay at your ranch, but that would be highly improper. The scandal would be less damaging than you being kidnapped or killed, the sheriff interrupted. Miss Osborne, I am going to be blunt. Mrs. Henderson's boarding house is in the middle of town, easy to access and hard to defend. The schoolhouse is even worse. Bennett's ranch is isolated, well protected, and he can keep watch more easily. It makes tactical sense. I cannot ask that of him, Olivia protested. It is too much. You are not asking, I am offering. Bennett's tone left no room for argument. You can have the main bedroom in the house. I will sleep in the bunkhouse with the hired men. Everything will be proper and above board. But you will be safe, and that is what matters. Olivia looked between the 2 men, feeling cornered but also touched by their concern. They were right, of course. Staying in town made her an easy target. But moving to Bennett's ranch felt like crossing a line, like accepting a level of intimacy that frightened her almost as much as the bandits did. What about school? She asked. The children need. The school committee has already discussed this, Sheriff Morrison said. Given the circumstances, they have agreed to suspend classes for 2 weeks. Parents are keeping their children home anyway after what happened. Once things settle down, you can resume teaching. So the decision had already been made, Olivia realized. The men had decided what was best for her, and now they were simply informing her. Part of her bristled at being managed like a child, but the larger part, the practical part that had kept her alive through a cross-country journey and 3 months in a frontier town, recognized that they were right. Very well, she said. I will stay at the ranch, but only until the danger passes. Relief flashed across Bennett's face. I will take you to the boarding house to pack your things. We can leave this afternoon. I have a deputy who will ride out with you, the sheriff added. Just in case anyone is watching. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Olivia dismissed the children early with a promise that school would resume soon. She and Bennett rode to Mrs. Henderson's, where she packed her few belongings into a trunk while the landlady fretted and fussed. Miss Porter helped fold dresses and assured Olivia that her reputation would survive. Everyone knows Mr. Parker is a gentleman, Miss Porter said firmly. And everyone knows you are only doing what is necessary to stay safe. Anyone who says otherwise will answer to me. Olivia hugged her gratefully. In 3 months, she had built friendships here, had created a community. She was not alone, not the way she had been in Philadelphia. By early afternoon, her trunk was loaded onto a wagon that Bennett had borrowed from the livery. The sheriff's deputy, a young man named Tom Ferris, rode alongside them as they left Laramie behind. Olivia watched the town recede into the distance and wondered when she would see it again. The Double R Ranch was 6 miles outside of town, nestled in a valley with the mountains rising behind it. The house was a sturdy log structure, larger than Olivia had expected, with a wide porch and shuttered windows. There was a barn, a bunkhouse, several corrals and fields where cattle grazed peacefully. It looked like a place someone could build a life. Bennett helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk inside. The interior of the house was neat but sparse, furnished with handmade furniture and lacking any feminine touches. It smelled of wood smoke and coffee and leather. "The bedroom is through here," Bennett said, leading her to a door off the main room. Inside was a large bed with a simple quilt, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the valley. "This was my parents' room. I have not used it since they passed. Figured it should go to someone who would appreciate it." "It is lovely," Olivia said softly. "Thank you, Bennett, for everything." He set her trunk at the foot of the bed. "Make yourself at home. I will be right outside if you need anything." He paused in the doorway. "Olivia, I want you to know that you are safe here. I will not let anyone hurt you. I give you my word." The intensity in his voice made her chest tight. "I believe you." After he left, Olivia unpacked her belongings, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe and setting her few books on the windowsill. The room was simple but comfortable, and as the afternoon sun streamed through the window, she felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Here, miles from town and surrounded by empty prairie, she could breathe. She ventured out into the main room to find Bennett stoking the fire in the large stone fireplace. He looked up as she entered. "Hungry? I can make some stew. It is not fancy, but it is filling." "Can I help?" They worked together to prepare the evening meal, falling into an easy rhythm. Bennett showed her where things were kept, and Olivia took over slicing vegetables while he browned meat in a large pot. It felt domestic in a way that both pleased and unsettled her. This was not her home, and Bennett was not her husband, but the scene felt right somehow. Over dinner, Bennett told her about the ranch, about the challenges of running it alone and his hopes for the future. "I want to expand the herd, maybe buy the adjoining property when old Mr. Simmons decides to sell. Build this into something substantial, something that lasts." "You want a legacy," Olivia said. "I suppose I do. My family worked hard for this land. I want to honor that. But it is also about building something for the future, for a family, eventually." He looked at her across the table, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. "Ranching is a hard life, but it is a good one. Honest work, clean air, room to grow. I think a man could be happy here with the right woman beside him." Olivia's heart was pounding. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? They had known each other for less than a week. But somehow, in the crucible of danger and fear, a connection had formed between them. She felt it every time he looked at her, every time his hand brushed hers. "I think a woman could be happy here too," she said quietly, "if she were brave enough to take the chance." Bennett reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and strong. "Are you brave enough, Olivia?" "I do not know," she admitted. "I came west to start over, to build a life on my own terms. I did not expect to find someone like you. I did not expect to want more than independence." "You can have both," Bennett said. "Independence and partnership. A woman does not have to give up who she is to share her life with someone. At least, she should not have to." His words were everything she had not known she needed to hear. Men in Philadelphia had expected her to be ornamental, to defer to their judgment in all things. Her father had treated her mother as little more than a servant, but Bennett was offering something different: respect, equality, partnership. "I am frightened," she confessed. "Of the bandits, yes. But also of this. of how much I already care for you." "I am frightened too," Bennett said. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "When I saw those men in the schoolhouse, when I realized what they meant to do, I felt something I have not felt in years. Terror at the thought of losing someone. I thought I had buried that feeling with my family. But you brought it back, Olivia. You made me want to protect something again, want to build something again." She stood and moved around the table to him. Bennett rose to meet her, and suddenly they were very close, his hands on her waist and her palms flat against his chest. She could feel his heart beating as fast as her own. "Bennett," she whispered. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the strength she knew he possessed. "Tell me to stop and I will." She could not tell him to stop, did not want to. Instead, she closed the distance between them and kissed him. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question being asked and answered. Then Bennett's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Olivia melted into him. She had been kissed before, fumbling encounters with boys in Philadelphia that had left her cold. But this was different. This was heat and tenderness and a promise of something more. This was coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Bennett rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the moment I saw you standing between those bandits and your students. You were so fierce, so determined, so beautiful." "I was terrified," Olivia said with a shaky laugh. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite the fear." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "You are the bravest woman I have ever met." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, the fire crackling in the hearth and the night settling over the ranch. Olivia felt safe in a way she had not felt since childhood, since before her mother's death and her father's downward spiral. Here, in this quiet valley with this quiet man, she had found something precious. But the peace was not to last. The attack came 3 nights later, in the darkest hours before dawn. Olivia woke to the sound of shattering glass and Bennett shouting her name. She grabbed the revolver from her bedside table and stumbled out of the bedroom to find smoke pouring through the broken window. "Fire!" Bennett shouted. He was already moving, throwing open the front door. "They set the barn on fire. Get outside now." Olivia ran onto the porch, the revolver clutched in her hand, and saw flames licking up the sides of the barn. The horses inside were screaming in terror. Bennett was already running toward the barn, and 2 of his ranch hands came pelting from the bunkhouse. Then the first gunshot rang out and one of the ranch hands went down. Olivia screamed. More shots followed, coming from the darkness beyond the firelight. Bennett dove behind a water trough, returning fire. The remaining ranch hand dragged his wounded companion toward the house. "Get inside." Bennett shouted at Olivia. "Bar the door." But Olivia could see shapes moving in the shadows, men on horseback circling the ranch. 3, 4, maybe more. If she hid in the house, Bennett and his men would be caught in the crossfire. She raised her revolver with shaking hands, sighted the way Bennett had taught her, and fired at the nearest horseman. The man yelped and jerked in his saddle. She had hit him, though not fatally. But her shot drew return fire, bullets thudding into the porch posts near her head. She dropped to the ground, her heart hammering. "Olivia, get inside," Bennett roared. He fired again, and one of the attackers fell from his horse. The remaining ranch hand had made it to the porch with his wounded companion. Olivia helped drag them inside, then took up a position at the window. She could see Bennett still crouched behind the trough, see the flames from the barn growing higher. If they did not put out the fire soon, the whole ranch would burn. But first, they had to survive the attack. She fired twice more, forcing one of the horsemen to retreat. Bennett used the distraction to run for the house, zigzagging to avoid bullets. He burst through the door and slammed it behind him, breathing hard. "How many are there?" Olivia asked. "6 that I counted. Maybe more." Bennett moved to the opposite window, reloading his rifle. "They mean to smoke us out or burn us down. Either way, they want you." "Then let me go to them," Olivia said. The words tasted like ash. "If I surrender, they will leave you alone." "Not a chance in hell." Bennett fired, and another attacker went down. "They will have to kill me before they touch you." The ranch hand, who was not wounded, a man named Dale, spoke up. "Mr. Parker, Pete is bleeding bad. He needs a doctor." "Can you ride?" Bennett asked. "Yes, sir." "Then take the fastest horse and ride for town. Get the sheriff and a doctor." "We will hold them off as long as we can." Dale nodded and slipped out the back door. Moments later, Olivia heard hoofbeats fading into the distance. She prayed he would make it. The siege continued through the night. The attackers kept up sporadic fire, preventing anyone from leaving the house or fighting the blaze that consumed the barn. Olivia reloaded her revolver with shaking hands and fired whenever she saw movement. Bennett moved from window to window, his face grim in the firelight. Pete, the wounded ranch hand, was fading. He had been shot in the chest, and blood soaked through the bandages Olivia had fashioned from a torn sheet. She did what she could to keep him comfortable, but she was no doctor. She held his hand and whispered prayers she half remembered from childhood. As false dawn lightened the eastern sky, the gunfire stopped. An eerie silence fell over the ranch, broken only by the crackling of flames. The barn was a complete loss, reduced to glowing embers and charred timber. "Why did they stop?" Olivia whispered. Bennett peered out the window, his rifle ready. "I do not know. Maybe they are regrouping. Maybe they ran out of ammunition." Then a voice called out from the darkness. "Miss Osborne, we know you are in there. Come out peaceful-like and we will let the cowboy and his men live. We only want you." Olivia recognized the voice. It was the first bandit, the one who had come into the schoolhouse. The leader of this group. "Think about it, miss," the voice continued. "More men are going to die because of you. Your daddy's debts are not worth all these lives, are they? Just come out and this ends." Bennett grabbed her arm as she moved toward the door. "No, absolutely not. He is right," Olivia said, tears streaming down her face. "Pete is dying because of me. Your barn is gone. How many more people have to suffer because of my father's mistakes?" "You are not responsible for your father's actions," Bennett said fiercely. "And if you go out there, they will use you and likely kill you anyway. I will not let that happen. You cannot stop them forever. They will burn the house next and we will all die. Then we die fighting." Bennett cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I made you a promise, Olivia. I said I would protect you, and I meant it. I would rather die defending you than live knowing I let them take you." His words broke something open inside her. She threw her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder. "I cannot lose you, not now, not when I have just found you." "You will not lose me." He held her tight. "Help is coming. Dale will bring the sheriff. We just have to hold out a little longer." But Pete died as the sun rose, his last breath rattling in his chest. Olivia closed his eyes with shaking hands and said a prayer over his body. Another person dead because of her. The guilt was crushing. The bandits began shooting again, and this time they aimed fire arrows at the house. The first one landed on the porch, and Bennett ran out to stomp it out. The second hit the roof, and smoke began to seep through the ceiling. "We have to leave," Bennett said. "The house is going to burn." They wrapped wet cloths around their faces and prepared to make a run for it. Bennett would go first, drawing fire while Olivia ran for the cover of a nearby shed. It was a desperate plan, but they were out of options. Bennett kissed her hard, fast, desperately. "If anything happens to me, you run. You do not stop, you do not look back. You ride for town and you live. Promise me." "I promise," Olivia lied. She had no intention of leaving him. He kicked open the door and charged out, firing as he ran. Olivia followed, her revolver in hand. Bullets kicked up dirt around them. The shed seemed impossibly far away, then she heard it, the thunder of hooves. Many horses, coming fast. She risked a glance over her shoulder and saw riders cresting the ridge, at least a dozen of them. The sheriff and his deputies, along with what looked like half the men from town. The bandits saw them too. They turned their horses and fired at the approaching posse, but they were outnumbered now. The sheriff's men returned fire and 2 more bandits fell. The rest tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The battle was over in minutes. The remaining bandits were surrounded and disarmed, 3 men bleeding from wounds but alive. The leader was not among them. Olivia searched the faces and realized he had escaped during the confusion. Sheriff Morrison dismounted and strode over to where Bennett and Olivia stood beside the burning house. "Everyone all right?" "Pete did not make it," Bennett said grimly. "The barn is gone and the house is not far behind," the sheriff swore. "I am sorry, Bennett. We came as fast as we could." He looked at the captured bandits with disgust. "We will make sure these men face justice." "What about the leader?" Olivia asked. "He got away. We will find him. I have men searching the area. He will not get far." The sheriff's expression softened. "Miss Osborne, I know you have been through hell, but this is almost over. With these men in custody, we can prove what the Mallorys have been doing. I have already sent a telegram to the U.S. Marshal's office. The Mallory gang is about to have bigger problems than your father's debt." Olivia felt numb. It was over. She had survived, but the cost was so high. Pete was dead. Bennett's barn was destroyed. The house was burning, all because of her. Men from town rushed forward with buckets, forming a line to fight the fire. Bennett joined them, and Olivia watched as they fought to save what remained of the house. By the time the flames were extinguished, the roof was half gone and the interior was smoke-damaged, but the structure still stood. It could be rebuilt. Over the next hours, order was slowly restored. The bodies were covered and would be taken to town. The captured bandits were loaded into a wagon, bound hand and foot. Dale returned with a doctor who could do nothing for Pete, but confirmed that the others would recover. And Bennett surveyed the damage to his ranch with an expression that broke Olivia's heart. She approached him as the sun climbed higher, casting harsh light over the destruction. "Bennett, I am so sorry. This is all my fault. I should never have. Stop." He turned to her, and his eyes were weary but not angry. "This is not your fault. You did not set this fire. You did not bring these men here. They made their choices, and Pete made his. He died defending his home, same as he would have done against rustlers or Indians or any other threat. But I brought the threat to your door. No, your father did, and the Mallory gang did. You are just trying to live your life, Olivia. You have nothing to apologize for." She wanted to believe him, but the grief and guilt were too strong. "I should go. I should leave Laramie before I cause more damage. I can find a teaching position somewhere else, somewhere my father's debts cannot follow." Bennett gripped her shoulders gently. "Do you remember what I told you about my mother?" "Yes. I said I wished someone had protected her. Someone strong enough, brave enough to stand against the men who killed her. That is what I am doing for you. That is what I choose to do. So please do not take that away from me by leaving. Do not make her death meaningless." His words pierced through the fog of her guilt. He was not protecting her out of obligation. He was doing it because he cared, because in the space of a week they had built something that mattered. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I did not think of it that way. I know." He pulled her into his arms and she clung to him. "We will rebuild, Olivia. The barn, the house, everything. It is just wood and nails. What matters is that you are safe, that we are both alive." She tilted her head back to look at him. His face was streaked with soot, his eyes red from smoke, his clothes torn and bloodied. He looked like he had been through a war, but he was alive, and he was hers if she was brave enough to claim him. "I love you," she said. The words tumbled out before she could stop them, but she did not regret them. "I know it is too soon, and I know we barely know each other, but I love you, Bennett Parker. You are my guardian angel now. You saved my life, and you gave me hope when I had none. And if you will have me, I want to stay. I want to help you rebuild. I want to make a life here with you." For a long moment, Bennett just stared at her. Then he laughed, a sound of pure joy that rang out across the ruined ranch. He picked her up and spun her around, and when he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that left her breathless. "I love you too," he said against her lips. "I think I loved you from the moment I saw you standing between those bandits and your students. You are fierce and brave and so beautiful it hurts. And yes, I will have you. Today, tomorrow, forever, if you will have me." "Yes," Olivia said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, yes." Sheriff Morrison cleared his throat loudly from a few feet away. "Hate to interrupt, but we need to get Miss Osborne's statement before we take these prisoners to town. Also, Preacher is here. He came with the posse and figured you might need him." Olivia gave her statement, describing the attack in as much detail as she could remember. The captured bandits were defiant at first, but when the sheriff informed them that they would be charged with murder, arson, and kidnapping, they began to talk. They confirmed that the Mallory gang had sent them, that there was a price on Olivia's head, and that the leader had orders to bring her back to Philadelphia by any means necessary. "What will happen to them?" Olivia asked. "They will hang, most likely," the sheriff said bluntly. "Murder is a capital offense, and Pete was well liked in these parts. No jury in Wyoming is going to let them walk." Olivia should have felt satisfaction, but she only felt tired. More death, more violence, all stemming from her father's selfish choices. When would it end? The sheriff must have seen her expression because his voice gentlened. "Miss Osborne, these men made their choices. They chose to follow orders that would hurt innocent people. They chose to set fire to a barn with horses inside. They chose to shoot Pete. Whatever happens to them now is justice, not your fault. Thank you, Sheriff." As the prisoners were loaded into the wagon, Reverend Thomas approached. He was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. "Miss Osborne, Mr. Parker, I heard about your ordeal. I wanted to offer my services for Pete's funeral and for anything else you might need." Bennett glanced at Olivia, and she saw the question in his eyes. She nodded, understanding what he was asking without words. "Actually, Reverend," Bennett said, "we might need your services sooner than you think. Would you be willing to perform a wedding?" The Reverend blinked in surprise. "A wedding when?" "Today, if possible." Now the Reverend smiled. "I see. Well, I do not see why not. Do you have witnesses?" "We have half the town here," Bennett said, gesturing at the men who had come with the posse. "I think we can manage." So there, in the charred remains of the ranch, with smoke still drifting from the ruined barn and Pete's body waiting for burial, Bennett Parker and Olivia Osborne were married. Olivia wore her soot-stained dress, and Bennett's shirt was torn, but when he took her hand and spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I, Bennett Parker, take you, Olivia Osborne, to be my wife. I promise to protect you, to honor you, to stand by you through whatever trials come. I promise to build a life with you, a home, a future. I promise to love you until my last breath." Olivia's voice shook as she repeated the vows, but her conviction was absolute. "I, Olivia Osborne, take you, Bennett Parker, to be my husband. I promise to stand by you, to support you, to face whatever comes together. I promise to love you with everything I am, for all the days of my life." The Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Bennett kissed her to the cheers and applause of the assembled men. It was not the wedding Olivia had ever imagined, but it was perfect in its own way. They had been forged in fire, literally and figuratively, and their bond was stronger for it. Over the next weeks, life slowly returned to normal. The captured bandits were tried and sentenced to hang. The leader was eventually found trying to cross into Colorado and was brought back to face justice. The U.S. Marshal's Office launched an investigation into the Mallory gang, and several high-ranking members were arrested. Olivia's father, facing his own legal troubles in Philadelphia, finally settled some of his debts, and word came that the bounty on Olivia had been lifted. Bennett and Olivia worked together to rebuild the ranch. The barn went up first, a new structure even sturdier than the original. The house repairs took longer, but by the time winter approached, they had a snug, comfortable home. Olivia returned to teaching, and the children welcomed her back with hugs and flowers. The town of Laramie embraced her fully now, not just as the schoolteacher but as Mrs. Parker, wife of one of their own. The marriage was everything Olivia had hoped for and more. Bennett was a patient and considerate husband, giving her space when she needed it and support when she asked. He encouraged her teaching, never once suggesting that she should give it up. They worked the ranch together, Olivia learning to rope cattle and mend fences, Bennett sitting in on her lessons sometimes and marveling at how she brought learning to life for the children. At night, they lay in the big bed that had been his parents', and they talked about their dreams. Bennett wanted to expand the ranch, maybe start breeding horses in addition to cattle. Olivia wanted to start a lending library for the town, so children without means could still access books. They made plans together, building a vision of a future that was theirs. 1 year after the attack on the ranch, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She told Bennett over breakfast, her hands shaking as she set down her coffee cup. "I think I am with child." Bennett went very still. Then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming him from stern cowboy to joyful husband. "Truly, I believe so. I have missed my courses and I have been feeling ill in the mornings." He stood and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." Olivia laughed, giddy with happiness and nerves. "Are you pleased?" "Pleased, Olivia, I am beyond pleased. I am thrilled, terrified but thrilled." He set her down and immediately became worried. "Should you be lifting things? Should you still be riding to school every day?" "We need to see the doctor, make sure you are well." "I am fine," Olivia assured him. "Women have babies every day. I am strong and healthy." But Bennett insisted on accompanying her to see Dr. Miller, who confirmed the pregnancy and told them to expect a baby in the spring. News spread through Laramie like wildfire, and soon the entire town was celebrating with them. Mrs. Henderson knitted booties. Miss Porter sewed tiny gowns. The schoolchildren drew pictures of the baby they imagined, and Olivia hung them all over the house. As winter settled over Wyoming, Olivia continued teaching, though she did agree to let Bennett drive her to and from school in the wagon once the snow started. She taught until her 8th month, when climbing on and off, the wagon became too difficult, and Dr. Miller advised rest. Those last weeks before the baby came, Olivia spent her days preparing the small room off the main bedroom as a nursery. Bennett carved a cradle from oak, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. He also began work on a rocking chair, determined that his wife should have a comfortable place to nurse their child. The baby came on a soft April morning, when the prairie was just beginning to turn green with new growth. Olivia's labor was long and hard, and there were moments when she feared she might not survive. But Dr. Miller was skilled, and Mrs. Henderson was there to hold her hand and wipe her brow, and Bennett paced outside, refusing to leave until he knew both his wife and child were safe. When the baby's cry finally pierced the air, Olivia sobbed with relief. Mrs. Henderson placed a squirming, red-faced bundle in her arms. "You have a son," she said, beaming. "A healthy, beautiful boy." Olivia looked down at her son, at his tiny fingers and dark hair and eyes that were already trying to focus on her face. Love crashed over her like a wave, so intense it stole her breath. This was her child, hers and Bennett's. A new life, a fresh start, a future full of hope. Bennett was allowed in a moment later, and the expression on his face when he saw his son was something Olivia would treasure forever. He knelt beside the bed, his hands gentle as he touched the baby's head. "He is perfect," Bennett whispered. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Olivia asked. They had discussed names for months but had never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Bennett said, "Thomas, after your mother's father if I remember right, and maybe James for a middle name after my father. Thomas James Parker." Olivia tested the name and smiled. "It is perfect." In the months that followed, the Parker family settled into a new rhythm. Olivia took a leave from teaching to care for baby Thomas, though she assured the school committee she would return once he was older. Bennett hired more ranch hands, giving himself time to help with the baby and marvel at every milestone. Thomas was a quiet baby, observing the world with solemn eyes, and he had his father's steady temperament. The ranch prospered. Bennett's dream of breeding horses became reality, and the Double R gained a reputation for quality stock. Olivia's dream of a lending library also came to fruition, with the town council setting aside a room in the church for books. She organized it herself, cataloging volumes and teaching children how to care for borrowed books. Life was good. Hard sometimes, the way frontier life always was, but good. Olivia and Bennett built their future together, day by day, choice by choice. The memory of that terrible attack faded, though it never disappeared entirely. Scars remained, both literal and emotional, but they had survived, and that survival had forged them into something stronger. 2 years after Thomas was born, a second child arrived, a daughter they named Margaret after Bennett's mother. She was loud where Thomas was quiet, always laughing and getting into mischief. Bennett doted on her shamelessly, and Olivia often found them having serious conversations in the barn, with baby Margaret babbling and Bennett nodding solemnly, as if she made perfect sense. Olivia returned to teaching when Margaret was 6 months old, bringing both children to the schoolhouse with her. The older students helped watch the little ones during recess, and it became a community effort. The school thrived, with more families moving to Laramie and needing education for their children. Years passed in a blur of work and laughter and love. Thomas grew into a serious boy who loved reading and helping his father with the horses. Margaret became a whirlwind of energy, always climbing something she should not or trying to rope the barn cats. 2 more children followed. A second son named Peter in honor of the ranch hand who had died protecting them, and another daughter they named Caroline. The Double R Ranch became one of the most successful in the territory. Bennett's reputation as a fair employer and skilled rancher spread, and he was eventually asked to serve on the territorial council. Olivia's school gained recognition as one of the best in Wyoming, with students going on to attend universities back east. Through it all, through the joys and the sorrows, the triumphs and the setbacks, Bennett and Olivia remained partners in the truest sense. They still took evening rides together when the weather was fine, still sat on the porch after the children were in bed and talked about their days. The passion between them never faded, and neither did the deep respect and friendship that formed the foundation of their marriage. On their 10th anniversary, Bennett surprised Olivia with a gift. He led her out to the field behind the house where a brand new building stood. It was a one-room structure, beautifully built with large windows and a small porch. "What is this?" Olivia asked, delighted and confused. "Your schoolhouse," Bennett said. "I know you love teaching at the town school, but I thought you might like to have classes here sometimes. For the ranch children, or special lessons, or just a quiet place to read, I wanted you to have a space that was entirely yours." Olivia walked inside to find shelves ready for books, a desk, a chalkboard, even a small stove for warmth. Tears filled her eyes as she turned to her husband. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "Not perfect," Bennett said, pulling her close. "But I try." "You saved my life," Olivia said softly. 10 years ago, you saw a stranger in trouble and you did not turn away. You gave me safety, and then you gave me love, and then you gave me this beautiful life. You are my guardian angel, Bennett Parker. Then and now and always." Bennett kissed her forehead, his arms strong and steady around her. "And you gave me purpose. You reminded me what I was fighting for, what I was building for. You gave me a family, a future, a reason to hope. We saved each other, Olivia." She thought of that terrified schoolteacher she had been, standing between bandits and children, certain she was about to die. She thought of the lonely cowboy who had ridden past a schoolhouse and chosen to help. Two strangers, brought together by violence but bound by something far stronger. "Yes," she agreed, resting her head on his chest and listening to his heartbeat. "I suppose we did." In the years that followed, the Parker family continued to grow and flourish. Thomas became a teacher like his mother, eventually taking over the Laramie school. Margaret married a cavalry officer and moved to Montana, where she taught Olivia's methods in a school of her own. Peter took over the Double R Ranch when Bennett's hands grew too stiff with age to work effectively, running it with the same fairness and skill his father had shown. Caroline became a doctor, one of the first female physicians in Wyoming. Olivia taught until she was 65 years old, finally retiring when her joints protested the long hours standing. Bennett worked the ranch until he was 70, only stepping back when Peter insisted. In their later years, they spent their time with grandchildren, 12 in total, each one a blessing. They sat on the porch of the home they had built together and watched the sun set over the mountains, content in the knowledge that they had lived well and loved deeply. When Bennett died at 82, Olivia held his hand and whispered the same words she had spoken on their wedding day. "I love you, until my last breath." He squeezed her hand weakly, his eyes full of the same fierce love they had held 50 years earlier. "And beyond," he whispered. Olivia followed him 2 years later, on a spring morning much like the one when their son Thomas had been born. She passed peacefully in her sleep, and the town of Laramie mourned the loss of their beloved schoolteacher. She was buried beside Bennett on the hill, overlooking the Double R Ranch, beneath a cottonwood tree they had planted together their first year of marriage. Their children and grandchildren gathered for the funeral, sharing stories of the remarkable couple who had built a legacy of love and learning. Thomas read from his mother's favorite poem. Margaret shared the story of how her parents met, how her father had saved her mother from bandits, and how they had fallen in love amid violence and fear. Peter talked about his father's integrity and work ethic. Caroline spoke of her mother's passion for education and equality. But the most moving tribute came from one of the grandchildren, a young woman named Olivia, after her grandmother. She stood beside the fresh grave and recounted a conversation she had once had with her grandmother. "I asked her once if she ever regretted coming west, if she wished she had stayed in Philadelphia where life might have been easier. She looked at me with those bright eyes and said, regret coming west. Child, coming to Wyoming was the best decision I ever made. Yes, it was hard. Yes, there was danger and loss, but it was also where I found myself, where I found my purpose, where I found love. Your grandfather was my guardian angel, but I was his too. We saved each other, and we built something that will last long after we are gone. Young Olivia looked around at the assembled family, at the prosperous ranch stretching out below them, at the town of Laramie visible in the distance. She was right. They did build something that lasts. They built this family, this community, this legacy of courage and love. And I think that is the greatest gift they could have left us. As the service ended and people began to drift away, young Olivia stayed behind for a moment. She placed a bouquet of wildflowers on her grandmother's grave, prairie asters and Indian paintbrush and lupine, the flowers that covered the Wyoming plains each spring. "Thank you, grandmother," she whispered. "Thank you for being brave enough to come west. Thank you for loving grandfather so completely. Thank you for showing all of us what it means to build a life of meaning." A breeze rustled through the cottonwood leaves, and in that moment, young Olivia could almost hear her grandmother's voice on the wind, full of laughter and love and that indomitable spirit that had carried her through so much. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and the Double R Ranch lay peaceful in the evening light. Somewhere in the barn, horses nickered softly. In the house, lights began to glow in the windows as the family gathered for the meal that would follow the funeral. Life went on, as it always did, carrying forward the legacy of two people who had found each other in the wildest of circumstances and built something beautiful. And on the hill beneath the cottonwood tree, two stones stood side by side, bearing simple inscriptions. Bennett James Parker, 1851–1933. Beloved husband, father, friend, guardian, and protector Olivia Margaret Parker, 1855–1935. Beloved wife, mother, teacher, guardian, angel. The words did not capture everything they had been to each other, to their family, to their community. But they hinted at the truth, that two people, brought together by violence but bound by love, had lived lives of courage and compassion. They had faced down danger, rebuilt from ashes, raised children and grandchildren, and left the world better than they had found it. As darkness fell over the Wyoming prairie, the stars emerged one by one, brilliant against the velvet sky. The same stars that had watched over a terrified schoolteacher and a determined cowboy on that August afternoon in 1877 now shone down on their final resting place. The same stars that had witnessed a love story born of fear and forged in fire. And somewhere in the vast expanse of sky and earth and time, Bennett and Olivia were together again, their spirits as intertwined in death as their lives had been. Two guardian angels watching over the family they had created, the legacy they had built, the love they had shared. The story of the cowboy who protected the schoolteacher from bandits, and the woman who whispered, "You are my guardian angel now," became legend in Laramie. It was a tale passed down through generations, a reminder that love could bloom even in the hardest soil, that courage could be found in the most unlikely places, and that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we end up saving in return. And if you listened carefully on quiet Wyoming nights, when the wind whispered through the grass and the cottonwoods rustled their leaves, you might almost hear the echo of that story. A schoolteacher's brave stand, a cowboy's protective fury. The words spoken in gratitude and love. "You are my guardian angel now." A promise made and kept, not just for days or weeks, but for a lifetime and beyond. The end.